The perfect lie. They say every love story begins with a promise, the kind that makes you believe forever actually exists. For Linda, that promise had a name. John. She was 26. He was 33. She thought she'd found her safe place in his arms, a man with confidence, charm, and that easy smile that could light up a room. Everyone said she was lucky. Lucky is such a funny word, because sometimes what looks like a blessing in public can be a burden in private. John was successful then, a regional manager in a logistics company. Smart, well-spoken, ambitious. He'd open doors for her, remember anniversaries, send flowers to her office just to say thinking of you. Linda's friends envied her. The dinners, the weekend trips, the couple selfies with matching smiles. Everything about them screamed hashtag relationship goals before hashtags even became a thing. But perfection has a way of hiding secrets. Sometimes the most beautiful smiles hide the deepest cracks. After the honeymoon came reality. 2 kids in quick succession. Bills, deadlines, responsibilities. The fairy tale faded into fatigue. Linda stayed home for a while after their second child, little Jason, was born. She told herself it was temporary, that once the kids grew, she'd return to work, maybe even start her own business. But John, he liked things just the way they were. You don't have to stress yourself, babe, he'd say. I'll take care of everything. And at first, it sounded like love, until she realized it wasn't about protection. It was about control. Control came in small doses. Why are you wearing that dress? You know I don't like it. Why are you still on the phone with your friend? It's past 10. Do you really need to go to that birthday dinner? I mean, he'll watch the kids. Each comment felt harmless at first, but slowly it chipped away at her. The confident woman who once laughed freely now measured her words before speaking. The sparkle in her eyes began to dim, not because she stopped loving him, but because she started fearing his reaction. To outsiders, they were the picture of happiness. Family barbecues, church on Sundays, Christmas cards with matching sweaters. John made sure everyone saw what he wanted them to see. The successful husband, the devoted father, the loving wife. And Linda played her role perfectly, because in every picture-perfect lie, there's someone who keeps pretending just to survive. She wasn't ready to admit it yet, not even to herself. She believed that good wives don't complain, that patience changes people, that if she just tried a little harder, maybe he'd remember the man he once was. But something was changing in John too. His tenderness turned to indifference. He began coming home late, smelling of a different perfume, not Linda's. When she asked, he laughed. You really think every scent you smell is another woman? You've been watching too many dramas, babe. That night, she stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. Not because of what she saw, but because deep down she already knew. The truth came out the way it often does. Through a friend of a friend. A whisper that turned into proof. John was seeing someone from work. Linda felt her world crumble, not because he cheated, but because he didn't even seem sorry. You're overreacting, he said. It was just a mistake. You know I love you. You're the mother of my kids. But love doesn't lie, and mistakes don't happen 3 times with the same person. She forgave him anyway, because forgiveness was easier than starting over. Because the idea of being a single mother terrified her more than betrayal itself. Then it happened again, and again. Each time a new excuse, a new promise, and each time Linda convinced herself she could handle it. But pain, when repeated long enough, becomes normal. She didn't realize it, but she was no longer living. She was surviving. One night, after a heated argument about another woman, John raised his hand. It wasn't the first time, but it was the first time she looked him in the eye and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just emptiness. That silence, that heavy, painful stillness was the beginning of her awakening. No one knew what happened inside their house. Not the neighbors, not her friends. When asked, she'd say, "We're fine." She learned to wear makeup not just for beauty, but for camouflage. Her children became her only reason to stay and her biggest reason to leave. She didn't want them to grow up thinking love meant shouting, slamming doors, or silence at dinner. Every morning, she'd wake up before the kids, sit by the kitchen window, and whisper to herself, "Maybe today will be different." But every night, the same tears soaked her pillow. She had become a stranger in her own life, a woman pretending to be okay in a world that didn't care to look deeper. And yet, inside that quiet pain, something was forming, a strength she didn't know she had. One evening, after another argument, she locked herself in the bathroom. Her reflection stared back, bruised, swollen, eyes tired from years of crying. But then something shifted. For the first time, she didn't pity herself. She pitied him. She realized he may have broken her heart, but she still had something he'd never touch, her will. Outside, John's charm was still alive. At parties, he played the doting husband, hand on her waist, whispering jokes. People adored them. Some even said, "I wish my marriage was like yours." She smiled back, not because she was happy, but because she was tired of explaining pain to people who only saw perfection. She had learned that not all prisons have bars. Some have wedding rings. There comes a moment in every woman's life when she stops waiting for someone to save her. Linda's moment was coming, quietly, invisibly, beneath the weight of her routine. She was collecting pieces of herself, one small act of courage at a time. She didn't know when she'd leave, but she knew she would. She remembered their wedding vows, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. But what happens when the sickness is the person beside you? When the worst never ends? Love, she realized, isn't about staying. It's about being safe. And safety was something her marriage could no longer offer. To the world, they were still the perfect couple. John's career was thriving. Linda's kids were well behaved. The house was big. The cars were shiny. The smiles were practiced. But inside those walls was a war no one could see, a woman silently screaming for peace. She'd lived the perfect lie for 7 years, but that lie was about to end. She looked out into the night, not searching for him, but searching for herself. And for the first time, the silence didn't scare her. It comforted her, because deep down she knew endings aren't always loud. Sometimes they begin quietly with a woman deciding she deserves more. Linda didn't leave that night, but something inside her already had. And that's how every breakthrough begins. Not with a grand escape, but with a quiet decision that whispers, "I'm done pretending." The cracks beneath the surface. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen blinds, painting golden stripes across the table. To any outsider, it looked peaceful, the perfect family moment. But silence in that house was never peace. It was tension dressed as calm. Linda had learned to measure the air, the way some people measure temperature. She could sense the mood the moment John's key turned in the door. Good mood, quiet dinner. Bad mood, eggshells everywhere. She didn't realize it then, but this was how she had started disappearing, one silent compromise at a time. Love is supposed to make you bloom. But Linda's love for John had become a kind of fear, the kind that made her double-check her tone, her words, even her laughter. She stopped wearing her favorite perfume because once he said, "You smell too strong." She started cooking only his favorite meals. She even stopped seeing her childhood best friend because John thought the friend was a bad influence. It wasn't obedience. It was survival, quiet, invisible survival. There are two kinds of abuse. The kind that leaves bruises and the kind that leaves you doubting your worth. John was fluent in both. He had a way of twisting her words. "You always make me angry. If you didn't push me, I wouldn't react this way. You should be grateful I'm still here." And somewhere along the way, she started believing him. She apologized for things she never did wrong. She tried to be perfect, thinking maybe perfection would keep the peace. But peace built on fear is just a pause between storms. Outside, everyone still adored John, the charming husband, the helpful neighbor, the man who smiled big at barbecues and offered to fix everyone's fences. No one ever asked why Linda's smiles looked tired. No one noticed how she flinched at sudden noises. People see what they want to see, and she had become a master at giving them that. Because telling the truth meant explaining the unthinkable, that the man she married was the same man who sometimes made her afraid to breathe too loudly. Linda had dreams once. She loved writing poetry. She used to fill notebooks with verses about love, laughter, and life. One night, John found one and laughed. "You think anyone wants to read this crap?" he sneered. Abusers don't always destroy you with fists. Sometimes they just convince you your soul doesn't matter. She became what he needed, not who she was. One night, after another fight, she packed a small bag. Her heart pounded, so hard she thought it might burst. The kids were asleep. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. She picked up her phone to call her sister. Then she stopped. Because what would she even say? That her husband, the one everyone admired, hit her again? That she was scared, but didn't know where to go? She unpacked the bag quietly and went back to bed. Sometimes the fear of leaving feels heavier than the pain of staying. Morning came with flowers on the table. A note, "I'm sorry, babe. You know I love you." And for a moment, she wanted to believe it. He'd take her out, hold her hand in public, kiss her forehead like nothing happened. And for a few days, she'd think maybe he really did change. But it always came back. Apology. Calm. Explosion. Silence. Repeat. It wasn't love anymore. It was a trap made of hope and habit. Children are more observant than we think. Her daughter, Ella, once asked, "Mommy, why do you cry in the bathroom?" Linda smiled and said, "I'm just tired, sweetheart." But deep down, she knew. Every bruise she hid from the world, her children saw in her eyes. She realized that staying wasn't protecting them anymore. It was teaching them the wrong kind of love. John loved appearances. He'd post photos online. "Dinner night with my queen." Meanwhile, she sat across the table, counting the seconds till it ended. The internet applauded. Couple goals. No one knew she'd spent the afternoon covering up a bruise with foundation. That's the thing about social media. It shows you faces, not truths. Behind every perfect photo, there's a story you'll never see. Control also meant money. He handled every account, every expense. When she asked for small things, a new dress, school supplies, he'd say, "Do you think money grows on trees?" He made her feel guilty for wanting anything. So she stopped asking and started saving small coins from grocery change. hidden at the back of a drawer. It wasn't much, but to her it was freedom in sense and courage. Years passed, and love became a language she no longer spoke. Her laughter felt foreign, her reflection a stranger. She used to wonder, where did I go? When did I disappear? And the truth was, she didn't vanish overnight. She faded, one compromise at a time. Abuse doesn't always start with a slap. Sometimes it starts with silence, the moment you stop recognizing your own voice. Then came the whispers again. Different woman this time. Then another. It wasn't about love for John. It was about power. When she confronted him, he said, "You're paranoid. Maybe if you looked better, I wouldn't need to." That sentence broke something deeper than her heart. It shattered her self-worth. She realized he was never going to stop hurting her. Because for men like John, pain was proof of control. By now, Linda barely saw her family. He'd told her they were meddling. He blocked her sister's number on her phone. Even her mother's visits became rare. Abuse thrives in isolation, and Linda's world had become very small for walls and constant fear. But even a small world has cracks, and through those cracks, light finds a way. One afternoon, she found herself staring out the window, watching the neighbors laugh in their yard. For a moment, she imagined it was her. A simple life, with laughter that didn't feel rehearsed. That vision, just a few seconds, was enough, because sometimes healing begins as a daydream. She realized she wasn't dead, just dormant, and maybe, just maybe, she could wake up again. She found courage one evening at the grocery store. A woman from church, Mrs. Carter, noticed the bruises on her arm. Instead of pretending not to see, she whispered, "You don't have to stay there, darling." That simple sentence cracked open the wall she'd built. For the first time in years, someone saw her, really saw her. She didn't answer then, but that night, she replayed those words over and over. You don't have to stay there. Courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. It whispered to Linda every time she hid coins in that drawer. Every time she refused to believe another apology. Every time she whispered to herself, "I deserve better." She wasn't strong yet, but she was becoming unbreakable. And strength, once awakened, doesn't go back to sleep. One morning, she looked in the mirror again. Same mirror, different woman. The bruises were fading, but the fire in her eyes had returned. She touched her face and whispered, "I'm still here." It wasn't defiance. It was resurrection. That was the moment she stopped being a victim, even before she left. Because freedom always starts inside. People think abuse ends the day you walk away. But it really ends the day you decide you're worth more than staying. She wasn't ready to leave yet, but she was no longer his shadow. The cracks beneath the surface were becoming clear, and through them, her light was beginning to shine. Choosing herself. They say it's not the loud fights that break a woman, it's the quiet ones. The nights when she cries so softly the walls can't even hear her. That's where Linda found herself, stuck between fear and freedom. She'd lived years inside a storm pretending it was weather. But the truth? The storm was him, and it had been raining far too long. Another bruise. It happened again that night. A small argument over dinner, cold rice, he said. Anger flared, words flew, and then silence, followed by the sound of something breaking. A plate, maybe her hope too. Her daughter cried quietly, covering her little brother's ears. Linda froze, not from fear, but from realization. Her kids weren't just witnessing her pain, they were living in it. That was the night she decided enough. The next morning, the house looked normal again. Broken glass swept, bruises covered, kids dressed for school. John was already gone, left early, like nothing happened. She packed their lunch boxes, kissed their foreheads, and smiled like mothers do. But behind that smile was a plan. She wasn't sure how or when, but she knew she couldn't stay another year, another month, maybe not even another week. Freedom doesn't start with running, it starts with deciding. And Linda's decision began with a phone call. She hadn't spoken to her sister, Rita, in almost 2 years. John made sure of that. When the call connected, she couldn't even speak at first, just sobbed. Rita didn't ask questions. She only said, "You don't have to explain. Just come home when you're ready." And for the first time in a long time, Linda felt seen. Every night after John fell asleep, she'd take small steps. Documents hidden under the floorboard. Kids' passports sealed in a plastic bag. Her savings, the coins, the tiny notes, now tucked into an old makeup box. She wasn't running yet. She was preparing to be free. She knew the most dangerous time in an abusive marriage is when you finally decide to leave. One night, she almost changed her mind. John came home early, flowers again. He said all the right words. He even cried. "I'll go for counseling. I swear, babe, I'll change." For a brief moment, she wanted to believe him. But then she saw something. Her daughter, watching from the hallway, shaking her head no. That tiny gesture, that silent plea, gave Linda her answer. She smiled weakly and said, "Okay." But deep down, she had already left. From that day, she stopped reacting to his anger. His insults no longer hit the same way. It's strange, when you've already decided to leave, their power over you begins to fade. She smiled more, but not for him, for herself. Every smile was a countdown. She was learning something he never expected. That silence can be power too. It was a Thursday evening. The kids were asleep. John came home angry again. Something about losing a deal at work. He yelled. She stayed quiet, and that silence drove him mad. He pushed her. She fell hard against the table. For the first time, she didn't cry. She just looked at him, not with fear, but with pity. He walked away, muttering. She sat there for hours, bleeding slightly, whispering to herself, "This is the last time." The next morning, she waited till he left for work. Then she moved fast, packed a few clothes, birth certificates, the kids' favorite toys. She called her sister. By noon, a car pulled up, Rita and her husband. Linda didn't look back. She didn't even lock the door. Because some doors aren't meant to be closed, they're meant to stay behind you. They drove for hours. The kids slept in the back seat, unaware their lives had just changed forever. Linda stared out the window, fields passing, tears falling silently. She felt grief and relief tangled together. Grief for the years she lost. Relief that she survived them. Freedom doesn't always feel joyful at first. Sometimes it feels like guilt because you've been trained to think leaving is wrong. They arrived at her sister's home past midnight. Rita held her like she used to when they were kids. No judgment, no questions. Just warmth. That night, Linda slept for 10 hours straight. No yelling, no fear, no pretending. Just the kind of silence that heals. She woke up to sunlight, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel dread. She felt possibility. The calls began the next day. John begged, threatened, cried, manipulated. He said he'd change. He said she'd ruin the kids' lives. He said she'd never make it without him. But Linda had already made it the moment she left. She didn't need to win an argument. She'd already won her freedom. She blocked his number. Then she cried, not for him, but for the woman she used to be. Life after abuse isn't a fairy tale. It's therapy sessions, paperwork, sleepless nights, but it's also laughter returning in small doses, like sunshine through cracked blinds. She took small jobs, saved every penny, re-enrolled in college part-time. Each step, tiny but sacred. She was building not just a new life, but a new version of herself. One who knew that peace isn't a luxury. It's a right. Meanwhile, John's life began to crumble. He lost his job. Word got around about his temper. Friends stopped calling. The charm that once fooled everyone had finally expired. Sometimes karma doesn't roar. It whispers through loneliness. And his world went quiet. He called once more, months later, just to say, "I never thought you'd actually leave." And Linda replied, "I never thought I'd have to." Years passed. Therapy turned pain into perspective. Her children grew up surrounded by calm, not chaos. They still asked about their father sometimes, and she told them the truth gently, without bitterness. She learned to laugh again, to trust again, not because someone saved her, but because she finally saved herself. She realized love isn't measured by what you endure. It's measured by what you refuse to tolerate. One evening, years later, she found her old poetry notebook, the one he'd mocked. The pages were worn, but the words still had life. She picked up a pen and wrote, "I am not who I was. I am who I became after surviving what tried to destroy me." That line became the title of her first published poem online. Thousands of women read it and found strength in her words. One Sunday, she went to church again after many years. The pastor said, "Sometimes God lets you lose what's hurting you so he can give you what will heal you." She wept, not from sadness, but from recognition. She wasn't angry at John anymore. Forgiveness wasn't for him, it was for her peace. And peace at last was hers. That chapter of pain ended, but her story didn't. It was just beginning, because after she learned to choose herself, life chose to bless her. She didn't rush love. It found her quietly, with patience, respect, and laughter. John's downfall. They say karma doesn't come with warning signs. It simply waits, patient as time itself. And when it arrives, it doesn't shout, it whispers. Months had passed since Linda left. At first, John was angry, furious that she dared to walk away. Then came the silence, the kind that echoes louder than any argument. He thought he'd move on easily, but slowly, life started peeling away everything he took for granted. His company downsized. At first, just a few layoffs. Then rumors began about his temper, his poor performance. Eventually, the inevitable happened. "We're sorry, John. The company's restructuring." Words he'd once said to others, now aimed at him. He walked out with a single box, a few files, a framed photo of his kids, and the heavy weight of consequences. He moved into a small apartment downtown. No family photos on the walls. No laughter echoing through the hallways. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of a lonely clock. He tried calling Linda. Blocked. He tried visiting. Restraining order. For the first time, the man who once controlled everyone's world couldn't control his own. Every night, he scrolled through old pictures, the ones he'd posted to show off their perfect life. There was Linda, smiling, the kids, laughing. He zoomed in her eyes. How had he missed the sadness there? Regret crept in slowly, like a chill in an empty room. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, suffocating, merciless. Karma doesn't destroy you instantly. It lets you watch everything you destroyed from the outside. His friends stopped inviting him out. His parents stopped defending him. Even his mistress, the woman he'd risked his marriage for, left when the money dried up. Without his charm, without his job, without his image, John was just John. And he didn't like what that looked like. Loneliness is the mirror karma holds up, and it never flatters. He started drinking more. At first, just to relax. Then to forget. Then, because there was nothing left to remember. He'd talk to himself, blaming everyone but him. She overreacted. She made me this way. But even lies start sounding hollow when you're the only one listening. He was haunted not by ghosts, but by echoes. Echoes of every name he called her. Every tear she cried. Every promise he broke. One day, he tried to call the kids. His daughter, Ella, answered. Her voice was polite, but distant. Hi, Dad. Hey, Princess. I miss you. We're busy right now, she said softly. Tell your brother I love him. Okay, she replied. Then silence. She didn't say I love you too. He noticed. That silence hit harder than any punch. He started dreaming of Linda. Not the broken version she became, but the one he met. Her laugh, her innocence, her belief in him. In his dreams, he'd reach out to her, but she always walked away. Every time he tried to follow, the floor would crumble beneath him. He'd wake up sweating, whispering her name. But even her name had stopped belonging to him. Rumors about him spread through town. People whispered at the grocery store. Old colleagues crossed the street to avoid small talk. He wasn't the charming husband anymore. He was the man who lost everything. And in small towns, reputations don't die quietly, they rot slowly. He once thought reputation was everything, but now he understood. Character is what remains when reputation is gone. One evening, a letter arrived, legal papers, child support, visitation rights. He read it twice, then threw it on the table. He felt rage, then defeat, then nothing, because even anger requires energy and he had none left. He sat there for hours, staring at the paper. The only thought in his head was, how did I become this? The same mirror Linda once stared into, now it was his turn. Lines deeper, eyes dull. He didn't recognize himself. He remembered the words he used to say. No one will ever love you like I do. He was right. No one ever would, and that was her salvation. Regret has a sound. It's the echo of your own cruelty bouncing back at you. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Job applications ignored. Savings gone. Calls unanswered. He tried dating again, but women sensed the bitterness in his smile. They always left after the first drink. He wasn't unlucky. He was reaping, because what you plant in others eventually grows in your own life. And he had planted pain. The stress took its toll. Insomnia, high blood pressure, doctor visits he couldn't afford. He sat in waiting rooms filled with strangers, realizing for the first time that no one was waiting for him. He thought about calling Linda again, just to say sorry. But pride, even in ruins, still whispered lies. And so he said nothing, and silence became his punishment. One afternoon, months later, he saw her by accident. Linda, walking down the street with 2 kids, both smiling, both taller now. her hair shorter, her face peaceful. She looked happy, not fake happy, not the kind he used to demand for photos. Real happiness, the kind that heals. She didn't see him, but he saw everything. The woman she became after surviving him. In that moment, he realized he had been the storm, and she had learned to dance in the rain. He went home and cried for hours, not the angry kind, the hollow kind that comes when you finally see the truth. He wasn't crying for her. He was crying for the man he could have been, the husband he never chose to be. He whispered her name into the silence, but silence is a mirror, and it only whispered it back. People think karma is revenge. It's not. It's revelation, showing you exactly what you made others feel. She once begged for kindness. He gave her cruelty. Now he begged for company, and life gave him loneliness. That's balance, not punishment. Years slipped by quietly. His hair grayed. His hands shook. He saw his children occasionally. Birthdays, holidays. They were polite, respectful, but distant. He tried to laugh with them, but laughter doesn't live in guilt. And every smile reminded him of what he lost. People talk about second chances, but the truth is, not everyone deserves one. One night, as he sat alone, he found himself whispering the words Linda once said, "Love shouldn't hurt." He finally understood what that meant. She had healed. He had hollowed. And that was the consequence. Life doesn't punish. It teaches. And when you break a heart that loved you purely, you don't just lose that person. You lose the part of yourself that was still capable of love. He spent years searching for peace. Linda found hers the day she left. And in the quiet end of his story, one truth remained. Karma never forgets an address. The light after the storm. Every storm eventually runs out of rain. And for Linda, the clouds finally began to clear. The years after her divorce were not easy, but they were hers. She had traded chaos for calm, fear for freedom. It wasn't glamorous, just peaceful. And sometimes peace feels foreign when you've lived too long in survival mode. She was learning to breathe again, deeply, slowly, like someone relearning how to live. Life after heartbreak isn't a fairy tale, it's reconstruction. She took small jobs, bookkeeping, part-time office work, anything to build independence. The money was modest, but every paycheck was a reminder. I can stand on my own. She moved into a smaller apartment, cozy, sunlit, full of laughter instead of shouting. It wasn't perfect, but it was safe. And in safety, her soul started to bloom again. The mirror that once showed pain now reflected strength. The bruises were gone, but the lessons remained. Her eyes no longer begged for love. They glowed with self-respect. She'd stopped saying, "I'm fine." Now she said, "I'm healing." And healing, she realized, wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about refusing to live there. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. She was running late, papers flying, coffee spilling, the kind of day that tests patience. "Whoa, easy there," a voice said, catching the papers before they hit the floor. That's how she met Josh. He was calm where life had been chaotic, kind where life had been cruel, the kind of man who listened with his eyes, not just his ears. She thanked him and hurried away. But fate, or maybe healing, wasn't done with them yet. They met again, this time at the same cafe she always stopped at after work. He was there, laptop open, same quiet smile. "You're the lady with the flying paperwork," he joked. She laughed, genuinely this time, the kind that reaches the eyes. They started talking, first about work, then life, then everything in between. For the first time in years, conversation felt easy, not cautious. Josh didn't rush. He never asked for her story, but somehow made space for it. He talked about his small business, his failures, his faith. She found herself opening up, not because he asked, but because he listened. Love didn't happen overnight. It grew quietly, like sunlight warming a frozen garden. And for a woman who'd once been afraid of love, that gentle growth felt like magic. One evening, sitting on a park bench, he turned to her and said, "I don't know what you've been through, Linda, but you look like someone who's fought hard to smile again." He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. He just took her hand, not to lead her, but to hold her steady. That was the moment she realized love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it comes quietly, holding your hand without demanding your heart. But healing doesn't erase fear. She worried, what if history repeated itself? What if love was just another trap? She tried to push Josh away. "You deserve someone who isn't broken," she said. He replied softly, "You're not broken, Linda. You're rebuilding. There's a difference." And somehow that was enough. Their love grew slowly, built on honesty, laughter, and patience. He met her children, not as a replacement, but as a friend. He helped with homework, cheered at soccer games, fixed things around the house. Her children loved him instantly, not because he was perfect, but because he was kind. They'd seen the opposite, and kindness felt like a miracle. With Josh, there were no raised voices, no walking on eggshells. Disagreements ended with calm words, not slammed doors. Love wasn't something she had to survive anymore. It was something she could rest in. She learned that real love isn't possession, it's peace. It wasn't a grand gesture. No fireworks, no crowd. Just a quiet evening, dinner at home, her favorite song playing in the background. Josh knelt down and said, "I don't want to complete you. I just want to join you in whatever comes next." For the first time, she said yes, not out of fear of being alone, but out of joy in being found. They married in a small garden surrounded by family and friends. Her children walked her down the aisle. There were no expensive decorations, no fancy gowns, just love. When she looked into Josh's eyes, she didn't see perfection. She saw safety, laughter, and home. After years of surviving storms, she finally stepped into sunlight. They started small, a modest home, shared dreams. Josh's business grew, but he never changed. Success didn't make him arrogant, it made him generous. Together, they built a home filled with love, honesty, and laughter. A house where no one had to whisper to be heard. For Linda, it wasn't just a second chance at love. It was a first chance at peace. Their 2 kids thrived. No more hiding in bedrooms or covering their ears. They grew up with bedtime stories, hugs, and the sound of calm. Years later, when Linda had 2 more boys with Josh, she made herself a promise that the only thing her children would inherit was love. She kept that promise. Joy has a sound. It's in shared laughter over morning coffee, kids running through sprinklers, and music playing while dinner cooks. She realized the world hadn't changed, she had. She no longer sought love to complete her, but to complement her growth. And that, she learned, is the purest form of love. One afternoon, she saw John again, years later, older, quieter, a stranger now. They met by accident at a grocery store. He looked at her and smiled weakly. "You look happy," he said. She replied softly, "I am. He wanted to say more, but the words never came. And she didn't need to hear them, because forgiveness was already behind her. That night, she sat on her porch, stars above, Josh beside her. She whispered, "I never thought I'd find peace again." He smiled and said, "You didn't find it, Linda. You created it." She looked at him and realized the storm was never meant to destroy her. It was meant to wash away what wasn't love, so real love could find its way in. Linda began sharing her story, not to relive the pain, but to remind others that healing is possible. Her story became a beacon for women who had lost their voices. She told them, "Leaving didn't end my story, it started it." And that's how her breakthrough became a blessing to others. Some people come into your life to love you. Others come to teach you what love isn't. Both are necessary. Linda's story reminds us, it's not the heartbreak that defines you. It's the courage to rebuild. She didn't just survive. She transformed. And in doing so, proved that love, the right kind, heals all that the wrong kind destroyed. Love Reborn, a family built on peace. Josh's business grew, but success never made him distant. He came home early, listened deeply, and never forgot the power of gentleness. He didn't try to fix Linda's past. He simply loved her present. He taught their sons that strength isn't about dominance. It's about responsibility. His calm became her anchor, and her courage became his pride. Her older kids, Ella and Jason, began to thrive again. Therapy turned their quiet fears into understanding. They learned that what they saw wasn't love, and that they could grow into something better. Ella once told her, "Mom, I want a marriage like yours and Josh's." Linda smiled, not because of perfection, but because her daughter had learned what peace looks like. Motherhood used to mean shielding her children from shouting. Now it means showing them affection without fear. Her two younger boys, born into love, not survival, grew up never knowing violence. They thought arguing meant disagreeing about what movie to watch. And that, to Linda, was victory. It wasn't the big milestones that healed her. It was the small, unremarkable ones, the shared cup of coffee before work, the sound of her kids saying, "Good night, Mom," and Josh whispering, "I'm proud of you." She realized healing doesn't arrive with fanfare. It tiptoes in through ordinary joy. And she guarded that joy fiercely because she knew what it cost. One autumn morning, a letter arrived. It was from John, simple, handwritten, regretful. He apologized, not for forgiveness, but for peace. He said he'd finally understood what he'd lost and that he hoped she'd found happiness. She read it once, smiled sadly, and placed it in a drawer, not to remember him, but to remember how far she'd come. She didn't hate him anymore. Hate is just another form of attachment. She'd outgrown that too. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant releasing the weight of pain so she could carry joy instead. She wrote in her diary, "I forgive not because he deserves it, but because I deserve peace." She finally understood that forgiveness is freedom, not for the one who hurt you, but for the one who survived. Years passed, and Linda and Josh's love matured like old wine. Deeper, richer, steadier. It wasn't about butterflies anymore. It was about partnership. Josh still made her laugh like that first day in the cafe. He still left sticky notes on the fridge. "You're amazing. Dinner's on me tonight." She learned that real romance isn't in grand gestures. It's in consistency. Their home became a sanctuary for others. Friends visited not just for dinner, but for peace. People said, "Your house feels different." Linda would smile and say, "It's not the walls, it's the love inside them." And she meant it. As the years went on, Linda taught her children a simple truth. Love isn't about staying, it's about growing together. Her sons grew up respectful, compassionate, grounded. Her daughter became a counselor for women in broken relationships, inspired by the strength she saw in her mother. That was Linda's legacy, not wealth, not fame, but healing passed down through generations. On their 10th anniversary, Josh surprised her with a trip to the beach, the same kind of place she used to dream of escaping to. They sat watching the horizon. He turned to her and said, "You know what amazes me most? You still look like peace." She replied, "That's because I finally live in it." She often thought about her past, not with bitterness but with gratitude, because without the heartbreak, she would have never learned self-worth. Without the storm, she would have never learned to dance in the rain. She used to curse the pain. Now she thanked it for breaking her open so light could get in. Linda was no longer the scared woman who hid behind smiles. She was a survivor, a wife, a mother, a mentor, and most importantly, herself. She shared her story not to seek pity, but to give others permission to rise. She said, "You can rebuild your life, not the same house, but a stronger one built on truth." One night, her daughter asked, "Mom, do you ever wish things had gone differently?" Linda smiled. "If they had, you wouldn't see this version of me. And I love who I became." Ella hugged her tightly. "Then I love who you became too." Years later, surrounded by her 4 boys and grown daughter, Linda celebrated her 50th birthday. Friends toasted to her strength, her smile, her story. Josh raised his glass and said, "To the woman who turned pain into peace and love into legacy." She looked around and realized this was everything she once prayed for in the dark. Later that night, after everyone slept, Linda sat on the porch alone under the stars. She whispered a quiet thank you, not to anyone in particular, but to life itself. She thought of the woman she used to be, frightened, forgiving, lost, and smiled, because that woman had walked her all the way here. The circle was complete. Love had not only returned, it had evolved. Love, when reborn from pain, becomes wiser. It stops needing to be loud. It starts needing to be true. Linda's home became a living reminder that peace is not luck, it's choice. Every day she chooses it again. She once thought her story ended the day she left her marriage. But that was just the middle. Because sometimes the real love story begins after you've learned what love is not. She was broken. Then she rebuilt her life when life blessed her. And what she created wasn't just a new life. It was a legacy of light. The moral lesson, the breakthrough. Every ending hides a beginning, and every heartbreak carries a seed, the seed of transformation. Linda's story began with pain, but it didn't end there. Because life doesn't end when people leave. It ends when you stop growing. And she never stopped. She thought she was breaking, but in truth, she was blooming. Pain is strange. It enters uninvited, stays too long, and leaves you changed. But when you finally step back, you realize it was never the enemy. It was the sculptor. Pain carved her into strength. It stripped away her illusions, polished her resilience, and left behind the purest version of herself, the one who finally knew her worth. She learned that pain doesn't destroy. It reveals. One evening, years later, Linda looked into her mirror again. The same mirror that once reflected tears and fear. Now it showed peace and power. She whispered, "Thank you for surviving when I wanted to give up." And the woman in the mirror, her older, wiser self, whispered back, "You didn't just survive, you became." That was her breakthrough, realizing that strength isn't found in never falling, but in always rising. People often ask Linda if she ever truly forgave John. Her answer surprised them. "I had to," she said, "because hate keeps you chained to what hurt you." She realized forgiveness isn't saying it was okay. It's saying it's over. It's giving yourself permission to stop carrying someone else's sin. Forgiveness, she learned, is not a gift to them. It's freedom for you. She wrote down 3 lessons in her journal, lessons she hoped her children would one day read. Lesson 1, never stay where love hurts. Lesson 2, healing isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering without bleeding. Lesson 3, you can lose everything and still gain yourself. She smiled after writing them, knowing those lines were not just words. They were the story of her life. She often said, awareness is the cure for repetition. Because once you see a pattern, you can break it. She wanted others to understand, abuse doesn't always look violent. Sometimes it's disguised as care, as control, as manipulation wrapped in love. She told them, if you ever have to shrink yourself to be loved, it's not love. And that truth set more women free than she'll ever know. When people asked what made her love with Josh different, she said, because it didn't demand proof. It gave peace. She learned that love doesn't shout to be heard. It whispers through actions. It doesn't chain you, it frees you. Real love is not found in grand promises, but in quiet consistency. She realized something profound. You don't get to choose what happens to you, but you always get to choose what it means. She chose to let her story mean strength. She chose to let her past fuel her compassion. And she chose to let love win, not the romantic kind, but the self-love that never leaves. She had once been afraid of her scars. Now they were her signature. Linda didn't become a new person. She became who she was before the world broke her. The laughter returned, the confidence, the light. She no longer looked for validation in others' eyes. She carried it in her own. She was no longer the woman who begged for love. She was the woman who embodied it. Her story didn't just heal her, it healed others. Her talks, her writings, her gentle strength, they became a ripple across countless lives. She never called herself a hero. She said, I'm just proof that broken things can still shine. And shine she did. Years rolled by quietly. Her children grew up. Her marriage deepened. The world outside changed. But peace remained constant inside her walls. She'd learned the greatest truth of all. Happiness is not found in moments. It's found in mindsets. And peace is not a destination. It's a daily practice. When her daughter Ella began her own family, she asked, Mom, how did you know it was time to leave? Linda smiled and replied, when staying felt like dying. She taught her children that courage isn't loud. It's quiet, sometimes trembling, but it moves anyway. And that's how legacies are built, not through perfection, but persistence. Linda often said faith was what kept her alive, not religious routine, but faith in something greater, in the idea that brokenness can lead to beauty. She believed God doesn't waste pain. He recycles it, turns suffering into strength, and heartbreak into testimony. She stopped asking, why me? And started saying, thank you for using me. She finally understood what a breakthrough really means. It's not the moment you escape. It's the moment you decide you're never going back. It's when your past loses its power over your peace. When you stop chasing love and start becoming it. That was her breakthrough. She used to think love and pain were opposites, but life taught her they're partners. Pain teaches you what love should never feel like, and love heals what pain once broke. She learned that every heartbreak, every betrayal, isn't there to punish you, but to prepare you for the kind of love you were meant to receive. She said, "Without the darkness, I wouldn't recognize light. Without loss, I wouldn't appreciate peace." She began every talk with these words. If you're listening and you're hurting, don't rush to heal. Grow through it. She told them, your heartbreak isn't your identity. It's your initiation. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. And that truth became her ministry, her message, her movement. Acceptance became her superpower. She stopped asking life to be easy. She started asking for the strength to handle it. She said, "I no longer fear storms because I've learned I'm the thunder too." She stopped fighting her past. She made peace with it, and it made peace with her. As the years passed, her story echoed far beyond her. In every woman who left, in every man who chose to heal, in every child who grew up knowing that love is gentle, not cruel. Her life became a testament that endings aren't failures. They're transitions from who you were to who you're becoming. She didn't just live happily ever after. She lived wisely ever after. Linda's breakthrough wasn't a moment. It was a lifetime of choices. She chose courage over comfort, truth over illusion, and peace over pretending. Please subscribe to our channel for more stories of breakups and THRUGHS, where we reveal stories of hurts, healing, and transformations that rebuild individuals. Also hit the notification bell so that you'll be the first to know whenever our next video drops. Please like and share to family and friends. You never know who you might be helping. Now, let's conclude the Linda story. She learned that love, real love, starts with you, because the way you treat yourself teaches others how to treat you. And if you're watching this, remember, you don't heal by going back to what broke you. You heal by walking forward into who you're meant to be.